Hey everybody, I'm Jason, and this is Jay's Project Garage. So I was gonna wait till tomorrow to do this video, but I'm gonna go ahead and start it now while it's fresh in my mind because I'm old and I'll forget by tomorrow. So I got the heat going out here in the shop. It's getting warm, nice and toasty, and somehow I got a whole bunch of flies that came back to life. Just got down to 30 degrees last night, and why won't these things die? I I hate bugs, I really do. So I got my cup of coffee, got the heat. I'm gonna work on the 69 tomorrow. The snow is just about done, so I'm getting ready to go do firewood. Frank, this is for you, buddy. Here's my thoughts. Okay, number one, before you get nuts with tuning this thing, you need to get everything the way it's going to be. The factory exhaust, horrible, especially if you're still running the manifolds. Or you got to remember, an engine is just an air pump. You get air in, you got to get the air out. So if the induction side is really good and you bring in all kinds of air, but you can't get it back out, then tuning can be even more difficult. And you're just going to be chasing your tail. And then when you change the manifolds and you put headers on it with exhaust, then you're going to have to go through and you're going to have to retune everything. Hopefully that makes sense. Now Cleveland's are already bad on the exhaust side. On the intake side, they're awesome. But the exhaust was lacking. And I'll tell you why here in just a second. Racers, I don't know who was the first one to do it. There's a little bit of confusion. May have been Bob Glidden. They're the first ones that used a plate on the exhaust side. They milled the exhaust part of the exhaust port off the cylinder head, and they used aluminum plates, and it raised the exhaust port to make it a more direct shot from the exhaust valve out of the cylinder head. And here's a picture of one. The reason the exhaust ports are the way they are on Cleveland's and on big block Fords, with 385s, was packaging. I read it years and years and years ago. It was an article. I don't remember if it was a Ford engineer. I don't remember. But you gotta remember when the Cleveland was designed, the cars that it was going in still had shock towers. And because of packaging and because of how tight the engine compartments were, they had to shape the exhaust ports so they get the exhaust out of the engine and down underneath the car and away from the shock towers. So everybody always talks about, well, Cleveland's don't flow on the exhaust side, they're horrible. It was a compromise. Luckily, guys like Bob Glidden and Dino Don figured out how to make the exhaust ports work. So the racers knew that getting the exhaust back out of the combustion chamber was critical. So you need to get that part of it taken care of. Now, the first thing I would do in your situation is I would figure out the timing. You didn't say anything about where you have your base timing set at or where you have your total and when it comes in and everything else. Now, you talked about wanting to recurve your distributor, which we'll get to in just a minute. Very first thing you need to do is you need to verify top dead center and you need to make sure that the mark is correct on your balancer. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the two barrel heads that you have on your engine is it's a really big combustion chamber. There's a lot of real estate for that flame front. Can't talk. Maybe I've had too much coffee. There's a lot of real estate for that flame front to cover. So you're gonna have to give it a little bit of a head start. It's something that the two barrel heads have been known for. There's no quench area, it's just a big open chamber. So you're gonna want more initial and probably more total. So I would start out at like 12 to 14 degrees initial, and you may have to add more. Now, after you get your bog sorted out, and it feels like the engine's running the way it's supposed to, but it still feels a little bit lazy, then you can start playing around with the curve on your distributor. Start bringing it in sooner and start adding more total. You can play around with the springs. I hate HEI distributors. I really, really do. I hated them back in the day. There was a reason all the guys were taking them off their cars. I think they're ugly, but to each their own. They are simple. I will give them that. So they are very easily tunable just by pulling the cap and the rotor, and the weights and everything are right there. So there is that. And then it's kind of hard to say where your total is going to need to be. That's just something that you're going to have to play with. It's going to be a little bit different for every combination. That's number one. Number two, I don't like the gimmicky camshafts. I don't like the rattler. I don't like the thumper. I don't like the bootlegger or the voodoo, because they're engineered to make power as kind of an afterthought, in my opinion. I think they're engineered more for sound. And the problem with engineering a camshaft for the sound is that you're manipulating the exhaust load. You manipulate the overlap and the duration numbers to give you that choppy idle that everybody likes. And I think, unless you really have a good combination, you're not going to make as much power as you could with a camshaft that's designed to do a certain thing and not worrying about the sound. You wind up with a lot of overlap. You wind up bleeding compression off. No, you said you have 10.5 to 1, which is really good. But I think you would make more power with like an Extreme Energy 4x4 grind or something along those lines, something that's made for torque. Because memory serves me right, you got this in a truck, pretty heavy. I don't know if it's 4-wheel drive. I don't know if you got big tires and stuff on it. It's a lot of weight. So what you did when you picked the torque converter is you looked at the RPM range of that camshaft, which starts at like 1800 to 5800 or something like that. And you picked a torque converter that stalled at 1800. Well, if you were to call a company that specializes in torque converters and transmissions, and you gave them your specs, I'm going to guess that they're going to pick a torque converter that flashes higher than the one you did to help the engine out, to get things moving, get you more into the power band. So they may have picked something that flashes above 2000, 22, 23, 2400. Is your torque converter actually stalling at 1800? When you give it gas, does it flash to 1800 or less or more? The torque converter is going to flash differently in different engines. So you can pick the exact same one. This thing says it stalls at 1800. Well, if you put it behind a big block, it's going to stall higher than that. If you put it behind a small block, it's going to stall lower than that, based on torque. So that's something else to keep in mind. And something else to think about. I have never had a problem with bog on an Edelbrock or Carter carburetor. Now, I've been able to tune it to make more power, but I've never had one flat bog. I don't know if yours is an issue with, I don't know if it's a lean bog. I'm going to assume it is. You said you played around with metering rods and jets and all that kind of stuff. And you said you've gone with a bigger accelerator pump. But on the arm from the accelerator pump, you can adjust how much of a shot it gets. You've got 3 holes. I think normally on Edelbrocks, with a factory calibration, it's in the center hole. So try giving it more of a shot by moving that rod. Now, the lean bog could also be because of the vacuum air doors. Edelbrocks are kind of a hybrid. They're kind of a crossover between a mechanical and vacuum secondaries. The throttle blades will open mechanically. The air valve will open depending on engine demands. So it sounds to me like you need to work on tuning the secondary air valve. You need to get those doors open sooner, letting more air and fuel in. Does that make sense? But I'll get more into that stuff later on in other videos, and I'll talk a lot more about Cleveland's, the 335 series. I've actually found a couple of engines. I just need to take the time, make the drive, and go pick them up. So I have one here so I can show you guys. But that's it for this part of the video. Frank, hopefully that was of some help to you. I'm not the end-all be-all. I don't know everything there is to know. And like I said, I would have to have the engine here. I would have to have the car, truck, whatever here to really be able to tune on it. And you need to get your air fuel ratio gauge in there so at least you have some idea what you're doing. It'll give you some idea what direction you need to go. But once you get it figured out, it sounds like your combos could be really good. But that's it. So I'm gonna get started on the 69, and I'll do that in the morning. Get another fire going, get more coffee. So I'll see you guys in the morning. This video is going to be a chopped up mess. I thought of something else I needed to add in there. I have and can actually tune both timing and the carburetor with nothing other than a vacuum gauge. So if you've watched Thunderhead 289's videos, and he's talked about the transfer slot, you need to make sure that you've got it squared before you put the carburetor on the car. And that'll actually get your idle speed pretty close. Now I don't have a problem with closing the throttle blades a little bit to bring idle down, but I don't like turning the idle up with the screw on the primaries. Now I might adjust the throttle blades on the secondaries if I need to get idle speed up just a little bit. Or you might need to start drilling small holes in the primary throttle blades to get your idle where it needs to be. But that transfer slot is super important, and Thunderhead covers all that stuff. But you need to get a vacuum gauge on your engine, and you're going to adjust the mixture screws to get the highest, steadiest vacuum reading. And then I always go a quarter turn further open. So you can also use a vacuum gauge for your timing. You start adding advance or start retarding it, and watch for the highest, steadiest vacuum reading. That Ranchero I did several months ago, all I did was put a vacuum gauge on it. I verified that a few things were working. I verified that the vacuum advance was working the way it's supposed to with my vacuum pump to make sure that everything inside the distributor was moving the way it was supposed to. But all the tuning that I did on that was with the vacuum gauge. And there was actually multiple things wrong with it. The arm for the accelerator pump was actually partially activated. I mean, it was completely out of adjustment. He had his idle speed turned up too high. There was all kinds of stuff wrong with it, and I did it all with the vacuum gauge. And from when he got here to when he left, it was absolutely night and day different. And it was just a little bit of time watching the gauge, playing with the timing, and playing with the carburetor. I wanted him to bring the car back so I could tune it more, and I was going to video it all. But he was actually so happy with it that he just drove it the way it was, the way I initially set it up. And it could definitely be better, but I guess we got the results we were looking for. So I went ahead and started editing this mess and realized that I'm already almost to 15 minutes. So I think we're going to make this its own video, and then I'll start an all new one tomorrow. You guys get 3 videos this weekend. Now don't you feel special? Gail, around here, when we say guys, it's not a gender thing. It's just, when I'm in the house and I'm trying to get everybody moving, hey, come on guys, let's go. It's just people. So please don't be offended. I haven't forgotten about you, I promise. That's it. That's going to be it for this video. I'll finish editing it and get it out, and then I'll make one on the 69 tomorrow. So Frank, this one's all about you, buddy. But for now, you guys get out of the shop and work on your projects. You have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.